Today we're going to do an HID headlight conversion on the FJR1300. Welcome to Mike's FJR Corner. Today we're going to do an HID headlight conversion on the FJR1300. My son about a year ago had converted his headlights on his Ninja to HIDs from HID Warehouse. These were the 8000 Kelvin because he liked it toward the blue. And he's had them on there for a year. The pattern is fairly well. It doesn't really blind the oncoming traffic. And he likes them a lot, and he's been edging me on to put them on my bike. So I wound up getting a kit from eBay. I didn't want to spend too much money, so I found something that was fairly inexpensive but looked like it was built well. So I bought this, how are we going to pronounce this? GENSSI, I guess. 55 watt HID headlight system. This comes with a this comes with a harness that normally is used in a car, so we're going to wind up cutting this harness down a little bit. That's an optional thing. You don't really have to. You can just wire tie it up, but we're going to be trimming this down. Also, the bulbs are an H4 bulb, and these are interesting because they have this little metal housing around it for low beam, and there's a solenoid which pushes the HID bulb upwards to change the focus in the assembly. So we're going to see how the pattern looks on these. They seem to have a nice cutout here for the pattern shape. I don't know if we'll get much reflections off of it, but we'll see how this works out. Also, we have the ballast. There's two of these ballasts, and these are the 50 watt. Excuse me. These are the 55 watt version, and I decided to go with the 55 watt because it has the metal shroud on the bulbs. They're not directly. You're not seeing them directly. So I thought there might be a little bit of cut down in the brightness with the shroud. So I figured, let me try the 55s. The kit itself wasn't expensive. I think it was just about $40. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the harness to get that down to smaller wire length. I'm then going to take the bike out. We're going to test the headlights and try to film it and get the pattern of the original OEM headlights. Then I'd like to take the black plastics off and temporarily hook the new HIDs into the bike and see what the pattern looks like off the HIDs. And if everything goes well, we're going to disassemble the front cowling, and I'm going to wind up fabricating a mount for the ballast. Okay, so the first step is going to be we're going to modify the harness. This is an optional step. You don't have to do that. You can just simply tie up the wires. I prefer to trim down the wires to the length that we need, so we just don't have all this extra cable underneath. Like I said, it's purely optional. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the little cover off the back of the plug. We're going to take a little jeweler's and stick it into the releasing slot and release the pin. There we go. Now we're going to trim this, get to about here. Make sure we got the right wire and trim it down. Now I'm going to trim the casing. Now I'm going to trim to about the same length as the split on the other wire. Using my razor, I'm just going to carefully go around the outer casing and slide it off. We need to now take this apart so we can get the connector and the two casings. I'm going to slice down the heat shrink. You can cut off this connector, slide the casing off, and the other connector we can remove the pins. Looks like they come through the front. And now I'm going to take the wires off the original connector. So I'll start by loosening up the edge a little bit. I'll take a screwdriver and unfold this piece here. Okay, and I get it unfolded enough that I can pull the wire through and just break the wire off. And next I'll slide each tubing on the wires and slide it up under the heat shrink all the way until it bottoms. Same thing for the other tubing. There we go. Now it's in all the way. Double check, make sure everything's tight. Now I'm going to take the heat gun and I'm going to shrink the tubing. Now I'm going to strip the wires by taking a razor knife and cutting the shield off and sliding it off. Same thing for the other two. Now that the wires are stripped, I'm going to tin each wire. Be careful not to overheat the wires while tinning. Now I'm going to trim its length. Just going to cut them about 1/8 inch long. So there's about 1/8 inch remaining. Well, the camera battery went out, so you didn't get me soldering this first connector on. But I'll show you the second one. What I do is I first take the pin and I tin the pin. We do this so that there's fresh solder on the pin and we won't have to heat it very hard when we go to put the wire in. I take the pin and place the wire over top of the solder ball that we just placed on the pin. Then I take the iron and I tin the iron and I put it right on top of the wire, lightly heat it up, then let go. Then I take the long nose and I re-crimp the end around the jacket. Crimping lightly, not going too hard into it, just enough to hold the wire. So I'll place a piece of heat shrink over top of the pin, just about up to the pin itself starts here. Then I'll heat up my air gun and I'll shrink the tubing, being careful not to let them slide too far. Take this little rubber insulator and slide it onto the wire. And take the old wire and let's loosen the crimp on it so that we can take this wire out and solder the new wire on. And now we're going to tin it. Tin the connector, make sure to get a good flow on it, and place the wire over top of the solder ball that we just placed on the pin. Once the connector has cooled, re-crimp the wire. Now that we have the pin soldered back onto the wire, we're going to slide it into the housing. And then slide the rubber back into the back of the plug. And place the clip back on the plug. Now we need to place the black wire into the connector. According to what we wrote down, the black wire goes toward the triangle end. So slide it in and it should click in. And the same for the red wire. Make sure that they're snug and they don't pull back out. If they pull back out, then there's little tabs on the on the pin that you can lightly bend outward. But these are good. Next, we're going to place a piece of heat shrink over the plug. Slide it over the connectors, so heat up our air gun and shrink our tubing. We now have a completed relay harness. We have one connection that goes to the headlight socket. We have another one that goes to the battery. That's so we draw our power directly from the battery instead of from the headlight socket. We have two connections that go to the solenoid on the HID bulbs. That's to switch from high to low beam. And we have two sockets that go to the ballast, and we have two ground pigtails here that either connect to a frame ground or we can connect it to the negative side of the battery. And that completes this harness, and we're ready to go install it. Okay, so let's take a ride out and see what the OEM headlights look like. Okay, we're out here on a dark road. We're looking at the beam pattern of the OEM halogens. Right now I'm in low beam. I have the camera in fixed mode, and this is the low beam pattern, and this is the high beam pattern. It's fairly rounded. It goes a fair distance down the road. Low beam is fairly short and stops at about 35 feet. 12 feet out. Find the peak. We're at 3,000 and we're on high beam, right? Yes, you're on high beam. Okay, move it to low beam. Around 1,500 on low beam. All right, we're back, and now we're going to disassemble the black plastics. Start by taking out the screws on the black plastics. There's one here. Remove the two chrome screws. Now that we have the screws removed, we could take a blanket and place it over the gas tank. So now we'll slide the black piece out, slowly working it toward the center. Okay, once you have it sideways, we could take and disconnect the flasher, and we have to take a small screwdriver and release the hook on the fuse block. Okay, and pull the fuse block out of the way, slide the plastic out. Now we could take the other tail and protect the fairing here. Remove the fairing bolt. Remove the black Phillips screw. While I was disassembling the black plastics here on this side, there are two push pins on the back side of the plastics that have to be removed. Remove the three fairing bolts. Remove the black screw from the fairing. Alright, carefully slide the plastic out. There's a little tab on this side, and you kind of have to slowly work it out. Now in my case I have some wires plugged in here, but something is holding me. There we are. Kind of had to fold that tab out from underneath the plastic there. And let me unplug the jack. There we go. And I can slide the plastic out. Now we're going to remove this plastic. Slowly work the plastic out from under the speedometer. Open this up. There we go. And carefully slide it out. Alright, now we got all the black plastics off, we're going to remove the halogen bulbs. I'm going to pop the rubber cover off, pull the plug, and I'm going to pop the spring off the back of the bulb and slide the bulb out. Now I'm going to slide the HID bulb into the housing. Snap the spring around the HID bulb before sliding it in, and slide the bulb in and lock it on the tab. Okay. Make sure it's fully seated. Unhook the plug from the right bulb. Pull the rubber detector out. Release the latch from the bulb and slide the bulb out. Okay, so my plan is I found a pocket here underneath the fairing that I can place the ballast in, and I can run the wires straight up into the ballast here. I'm also going to put the harness and bolt it onto this bolt here and hook it across to the battery and run the other wires straight across. Alright, we have all the wiring done. The ballast are wired in. The connections to the battery are done. So I'm going to take the cloths off here and we're going to go for a ride. Here we are testing the HID headlights. As you see, it's still a circular pattern. The cutoff is fairly good. It's still about 35 feet out, but it's just much brighter. The high beam is just as bright and goes out a little bit further than the original halogens, but it's brighter for a longer distance. $4,500 on low beam. Switch to high beam. $5,300 high beam. Well, the HID headlight test went well. The pattern seemed to be circular, very similar to the halogens. The light output was a lot brighter, but it didn't appear to had a good cutoff, so it didn't appear to be any different than halogens. So I want to do two more tests. One of them is I want to check the current that it's drawing. Yes, they're 55 watts each, and so are the halogens, but I just want to make sure there's no extra current being drawn. I also want to do a temperature test. I want to measure the temperature to see if the bases are getting any hotter. Just want to make sure that we don't start melting plastic. I don't think they're getting hotter, but I'd like to measure it. So let's do the current test. Alright, I have the fuse removed from the inline socket, and I have my meter connected across it. So let's see what kind of current we get. Okay, well the results are, during initial startup the current was about 15.8 amp. The voltage was at 13.2 at the time. So that comes up to about 208 to 210 watts. As the HIDs warmed up, the current went down to about 7.8 amp and the voltage had gone up to 13.8 volts. So that figures out to around 107 watts. So that's good. That's close to 110 watts between two ballasts. Okay, so the bike's been running for about 10 minutes and let's measure some temperatures. The left side is a halogen and the right side is an HID. I'm measuring right on the metal tabs. About 170. About 170 as well. 167. 132. 33. Okay, the results of the heat test were pretty good. The halogen on the left was running hotter than the HID on the right on the front side. The halogen was running about 170 degrees and the HID was peaking out at about 132 degrees. On the back side they were a little more even. Both the left and the right side were running about 170 degrees. Both of them I was measuring any place I can get the hot spot. So it was around the metal ring on the outside and the tabs. So they were both running about equal. Let's move on to installing the HIDs. Okay, earlier we had gotten all the black plastics off the bike. So now we need to take the front cowling off. We do that by first removing the two bolts on the mirrors. And we do that for both sides. And using my 10 millimeter, I'm going to loosen the bolts. Once the nuts are partially loose, hold the mirror with your other hand and slowly take off the nuts. Okay, and slide the mirror off. Repeat the process for the right mirror. Disconnect the battery. We're now going to remove the windshield by removing the black nylon screws. We're going to take the in-between ones out first and leave these three in. Okay, loosen all three remaining screws while holding the top of the windshield. And remove the outside two screws. And remove the final screw. And take the whole thing to a safe place. Lower the windshield down into the bottom position. Place the cloth underneath to protect the fairing. Loosen the plate bolts. With an Allen wrench on one side, take a 10 millimeter and loosen the bolt. Once the bolt is loose, take the nut off. Leave the bolt in for now. Take the nut off the other side. Now remove the bolt. There should be several washers underneath, so it's spring loaded, so just kind of lift it up. Slide the parts out and set down the arm. And there's a little bushing in the piece of metal. Same thing for the other side. Bring this towel around and slide it off. Now we're going to remove the three fairing bolts. Remove the three bolts on the right side. We need to remove the black plastics from under the fairing. We do that by removing the three screws on each side as well as the two push pins. Remove the 2 bolts from the fairing. Start by removing the lower bolt, then remove the middle bolt. Disconnect the turn signal and put it in a safe place. Remove the 2 fairing screws here and here. Remove the 2 fairing screws on the right side. The fairing should now be loose, and slowly work all the joints out. With all the clips off and the fairing is now free, carefully remove the fairing while being careful of the paint. For those of you who want to change the faces on the gauges, or you simply just want to change the bulbs to LED, there are 3 screws that you have to remove to take the dash off. 2 of them are on the top, 1's in the bottom in the middle. You also have to disconnect the harness on the top of the gauge cluster. Once that's all removed, it slides out from the front, and you can take that away and set it on a table and remove the back. Once the back's opened, you can get to all of the bulbs. You can also slide the face plastic off, and you can get to the gauges. Alright, so I'm ready to install. I removed the windshield motor to get it out of the way. What I have figured out is the wiring harness would fit nicely along this frame member here, and the wires can come back through both sides here. The headlight assemblies fit from, here's the 2 bracket holes, and it fits around through here like this on both sides. What I found is there's a pocket between the 2 headlight assemblies. If I put a bracket here and mount them right here below the frame, it would fit right down in the pocket. There's about a 2.5-inch wide gap between the 2 headlights, so that's perfect. So what I did is I took a piece of stock aluminum and I built a bracket out of that aluminum, and it was just simply cut out and filed down and smooth, and used a little bit of steel wool to brighten it up. But down here there's 2 holes in the frame. So what I did was I put 2 grommets in there, and I have these T-nuts that I'm putting inside the grommet. So that will fit inside here like that, and this will bolt up just like that. Okay, so let's get this bracket installed. I'm going to slide the T-nut to the frame and slide a stainless steel screw in through the bracket and up into the T-nut, and snug up the bolts. I'm now going to mount the ballast like this using these screws and spacers. With all the screws and spacers in place, and slide it into the bracket and place the 3 nuts on it. We have our ballast mounted onto the bracket. We have the wiring going up this direction, up high, because the headlights are right here. The ballast coil is glued with 3M double-sided mounting tape onto the frame. The ground is attached here, and the wires get wire tied here and loop through the connector, come back up to here, and then up to the relay. And the same thing is duplicated on the right side. Wire tie the relay to the frame member. Route the HID wires in front of the frame on both sides. I decided to remove the headlight assembly from the fairing and slide it onto the front of the bike and make sure all the wiring cleared. Make sure the rubber is on the mirror mounts, and slide the fairing through, being careful of the paint, Fit the front bracket through, slide the other brackets on here. Okay, and slowly work around the post on each side and slide it in place. Maybe a little snug. Get it clipped over the clips on the top. Get the rubber sitting in place. Reinstall the 4 mounting screws on the fairing. Place the HID power and any accessory wires under your positive terminals and negative terminals. Test to make sure everything is functioning. Reinstall the mirror by sliding the mirror through the holes, tightening down the nuts, then repeat for the right side. Let's install the left fairing by first connecting the turn signal. Slide the fairing underneath the upper fairing and replace the center screw. Replace the 3 screws. Repeat the process for the right fairing. Replace the screws in the lower fairing. Replace the black plastic that goes up under the fairing. Replace the 3 screws. Repeat on the right side of the bike. The rubber on the bulb was trimmed down by about 1/4 of an inch in order to fit the HID bulb. Once the connections are connected to the bulb, you push it up into the frame here. There's a little cubby hole right there, and when we put the plastic on, it covers the wires. Carefully reinstall the front left plastic piece. This piece fits under the edge of the speedometer and under this front ledge. Replace the painted screw. Also replace the black plastic on the right. Reinstall the painted screw. Reinstall the lower right black plastic. Replace the screws. Tightening finger tight. Replace the push pin into the center hole. With a rag laid over the side, take the black plastic and lay it on its side. Slide the fuse box back onto the clip. Connect the flashers and work the plastic underneath the fairing. Replace the screws. I took the opportunity of not having the windshield on to apply some wax. Place one of the screws in the bracket to hold it in place. Place the washer on the bolt and lubricate the bushing. Slide the bushing in from the inside. Put the cap nut on. Then repeat for the right side. Connect the arm to the motor drive by replacing the 2 screws. Lightly tighten both screws. Lightly tighten the bushing. Make sure the mechanism operates smoothly. Replace the windshield by screwing the screws into the front plate. Use 2 outer screws to lock the screen in place. Once the 2 screws are tightened down, replace the rest of the screws. Do not over tighten, as these are nylon screws and they're designed to snap. Well, this concludes the installation of the HID headlights. I was very lucky to get a pocket where the ballast fit perfectly into. Also the bracket where I mounted it to the frame, I didn't have to drill any holes. There were already holes provided. So that went really well. In the future, I may add a relay to the right headlight that will turn on the right headlight a little bit later. This way I reduce the initial current draw. That may be a future video to upgrade to that. I'll have to see what I could find in the way of a pre-timed relay or some type of variable time relay. So again, thank you for watching, and give me a thumbs up or hit the subscribe button, and thank you and goodbye.